lovely crowd, very nice, and we've got a wonderful building. I wasn't quite, realising that it's so near Christmas. I thought these presents behind us. I'm just going to ignore those. I've got my boxes here, and my talk's going to be me and my hats. It's more about me and my hats, but my hats wouldn't be there without me. And I've given over 100 talks, I haven't counted lately, on me and my hats. So they're still quite important to me, not just for the talk, but to share them. I wasn't born in England. I've also just written an autobiography. It's self-published, but it's not quite out yet. But I wasn't born in England, and I need to tell her, because when it comes to talking about the war, you see, I was on the other side. I feel embarrassed, but I've been here long enough now. So I was born between Hamburg and Berlin, if you know where that is. But I grew up in Schleswig-Holstein. Schleswig-Holstein is that big, which goes up to Denmark. It's a title which Prince Philip had, but he dropped it when he was a queen because it was embarrassing, Schleswig-Holstein. That's where I grew up. And we had the war coming on. That's why we moved there, because my dad was one of the first to be killed in the war. He was killed in France. He was shot there in the lung in France. I'm not exactly sure where. I didn't realise that if you get shot, you should have someone there to help you out if you're lying on the ground or whatever. He was shot in the lung and nothing could be done. Eventually he was taken to Heidelberg Hospital, and that's where he died, because he couldn't do anything. I don't know what he now was shot in the lung, he can't do much. So when I was 2, my mother was widowed, she was 24, and for the next 3 years, until she remarried, I was a poor thing. Wearing black because that's what you had to do, and she was a young widow, and she'd given her husband to the country, so she was a very important person, and I was a poor thing. So my grandmother always told me that I was a poor thing. My grandmother comes from Denmark, and she said, my mother wearing black and getting a lot of sympathy from people for what she'd done, given her husband. And you can imagine, it wasn't very joyful for me. Not that I knew it, but it wasn't. And but I do remember one thing about my mother, and this is when she went out. We had a sort of stand there for coats and hats and things by the front door, and when she went out, she put on a hat. And when she put on a hat, she put on a little smile, like you do. When you put on a hat, you sort of feel good, and you smile yourself, and you sort of tip it this way and that way and see if it fits right, and then you go out with your hat. And I used to watch her putting on the hat when we were ready to go out. And I thought this was wonderful. And I realised that when you put on a hat, something happens to you. You forget all about your worries. You just put on a hat, look at yourself, feel good, and then you go out. I suppose you forget about it. But it's that moment, which is quite critical. When you put on that hat and feel good. And this led me to the love of drama and performance and all this kind of thing, and not just hats. Keeping that in mind, I also came across art. Well, nowadays you do art everywhere, and you just look at it. Whereas when I was at school, we didn't do art. There was no work and no drawing on the walls. It was all about reading and writing, and not much else. And there was one girl, she knew how to draw, and she showed me how to draw a jackdaw, who was got a little bit of blue and white. And I thought that was fascinating, just this one drawing. And there was another girl who knew how to sing, and she actually ended up at the Hamburg Opera. She was a singer, so to see someone sing, to have his voice coming out of them, is absolutely fantastic. Later on, I grew a little bit older, we started a drama group with the girls in the street. So I'm jumping on now, because when I was 5, there was a young soldier came through town. And he was asking about my mother. And he said, I knew her a few years ago, and I was just wondering how she is. Well, he was 10 years older. He met my mother when she was 16. He was 26 now. and found out that yes, she'd been married and she's had a child, she's lost her husband. I always said it was very sad. Do you think that I would see her at all, you know? So my grandpa heard of us, because the town where we grew up, you know, everything went like wildfire. Without phones, it was just, you didn't have phones, you know, it just went round. My grandpa heard about it, went to see my mum and said, there's a young soldier asking after you, time you got married again. You see, there was a shortage of men. And also, and there's a young woman who's got a child, who's the ones that are after her? My granddad was my guardian. I didn't have I was just an orphan, so to speak. My grandpa was my guardian, and he was worried about her when I grew up and what's going to happen to her. So they got married, you know, when he next came on leave, because he weren't quite sure when he was going to come again as a soldier. He was obviously, that was during the war. And so they got married again and had another 2 girls, lovely. I never called them stepfather. I know other people do. And I never called my stepsisters stepsisters. They were just my sisters. That's the way I grew up. At the same time, I wasn't adopted either. I don't know why. It's something I worried about later. But we were quite happy. In 1945, I think my sisters were just about born then, something like that. In 1945, we had the British occupation. Now that meant that 80 young soldiers landed on my grandparents' farm and settled down in the barn, because there was when they take the helmet over. That wasn't going on. They just landed on the farm and settled down there. All young soldiers, nothing to do, because when you occupy land, there's nothing going on. You know, you just sort of spend the day and eat chocolates and play and that kind of thing. At the same time, the whole place in Schleswig-Holstein in particular was saturated with refugees from the east. They'd been fleeing from the Russians first, and then were just fleeing, and because they couldn't live anywhere, they just moved over. So we were sharing our house at the time with 500 other family units. Because what happens when they came along with pulling their carts and things, then they went to the town hall, and on arrival they were given a space to live. And everyone who had a house was given one room for the bedroom for the parents, one living room, and one room for the children. So we had 3 rooms in our house, and the other 5 units. There was a couple there, a single woman, a single chap, and a couple with a child. And that's something like that. You know, I can't remember exactly now, but never mind. So, and they're sharing the kitchen and the bucket loo. Bucket loo. You know where a bucket loo is? My dad had emptied it around the garden under the Christmas tree. He was most annoyed with girls, because having 3 girls meant they kept on going to the room. Never mind. The bucket was full quite easily, yeah. So that was that. So the soldiers came. And the soldiers, being British, you see, spoke a different language. Now I was used to hearing Danish from my grandparents. And I was fascinated by this English, because, you know, in 1945 I hadn't learned English. I didn't have English at school, that came later. But what I liked about the soldiers was, first of all, they had all the time in the world for us children. And they played with us, and they gave us chocolates, and, you know, played with us. I had all the time in the world when I was with my grandparents on the farm. And the language was interesting, so they tried to sort of speak with us, because they didn't know any German. And I thought England must be a wonderful place. And that stayed in my mind, because, you know, it was all crowded, everyone was busy. And I was thinking about people, there are people in this world who've got time, might speak a different language, come from far away maybe. I didn't know, you know, how far England was, I hadn't got a concept of that at all. But there are people who have got time for each other and for children, and they've got lovely things to eat, and they speak a different language. So when I learned English at school, I thought, what I want to do is go to England. And people start asking you, what are you going to do, you know, when you grow up? And I said, I want to go to England. It's a sort of bravado thing, you know, because nobody wanted to go to England. And it wasn't really the sort of thing one did anyway. But when I left school, at 15,
You see, the girls didn't go to work like nowadays, or college. College was too far away and didn't really think of going to college, not at that time. So I was sent into the country because I wasn't allowed to go to England. I was sent to go into the country for a year, like my mother did when she left school. Because in farming, that's what you do. You see, in farming, if you have a son, the son takes over the farm and he helps alongside the farmer. If you've got a daughter as a farmer, then the daughter has to go to another farm to meet someone there so she can start farming, somewhere else. Marry a chap, meet a chap, because a lot of men working on the farms, young men helping out. So I was sent to a farm to learn these 4 skills that you need when you get married, because that's what girls do, they get married. So you have to learn how to cook, how to run a household, how to look after a small livestock, and to run a kitchen garden. Those are the 4 skills that you need, and I had a year to learn those, so I'm going to tell you that. One day I remember I killed 12 chickens. She showed me how to do it, and at that time what you did, you sort of get it under your arm, and you first of all, hold the things under your arm, and then when you sort of really hold well, then you knock it on the stone to knock it out of it, and then you slit the throat. Hold on to it, because that's when it starts jerking about, you're going to lose it. It flies off if you don't hold on to it. And then you start plucking it and put it to one side. So I did 12 on a hot summer's day when they don't lay so much. And I thought it's something I don't really want to do. But time went on, so I came home again, and could I go to England now? Because that was a nice little dream thing. Well, by that time, they knew that girls had to work, because there was work to be done in offices, and there weren't the men about, so the girls had to go work in offices. Not that I knew what an office was, but I then had to go, not just to an office, but I had to go to commercial college and learn how to type, how to do shorthand, business, bookkeeping, and improve my English and my French, because I thought you might need that as well. And that's what I did for next year. Then I said, well, can I go to England? Then it became possible to come as an au pair. And so we went to the labour exchange, and we said to my daughter, I didn't do anything, my parents did all that, my mother, I should think, took us along, and yes, there was a vacancy in Neatham Manor, Alton, Hampshire, and I should go along. So off I went. I was sent off to England, and very nice. It was a lovely manor, very nice. She was one of the Queen's family, very nice, very interesting. So they had a nanny housekeeper and 2 boys, and I fitted in, and lots of polishing of furniture and all that kind of thing, antique stuff, and then the windows, and lots of cleaning to do, and not much else, but it was okay. But sort of after a few weeks, she came up to me and said that I should really, move on, because you see, the trouble is when you're an au pair and there's a husband and he doesn't know how to pay for au pairs, the wife gets a bit upset. And I think the husband must have been eyeing me up or something, and she thought it was time that I left. So I had to pack my bags, and we had a little suitcase, and they dropped me off at a hotel in Essen and told me to get the Lady magazine to get another job. Which I did, and I moved to 2 weeks, for 2 weeks to Dutch and Windsor with an old couple. I was there just as a sort of companion housekeeper while their housekeeper was away. And I remember 3 things that struck me. One was that they had jumping every day. Jumping, rice, liquid, and cooking and so on. And then they had tea in the summer house in the garden every day. And it was a rotating summer house. And I had to take a tray down with a 3-tiered thing with biscuits and things. I thought it was the weirdest thing, to carry biscuits to this little tea house every day. And the other thing, they had he was very tall, he had a very long bath. I never had a bath at home. We didn't have a bath, we didn't have washing down the fan. But he had a long bath, and I was allowed to wait for him, and I nearly drowned. He was so long, and I slid down underneath the water. Never forgot this experience. After 2 weeks, I'd already arranged to get another job in London, and this was with Mrs. Hertzfeld. My husband was a judge in New York, and she was doing up buying flats and getting the interior decorator from John Lewis, and we had inch-thick carpets, white carpets throughout. It was made up for a film director, who was doing Tom Thumb at the time, and a sort of galley kitchen, which was as wide as this. You go in and do something there, but didn't do very much, not for cooking. It didn't do cooking very much. We went to the East End for these salt beef sandwiches, salt beef sandwiches in the East End. We also went to Harrods and bought some little biscuits there, and also to the corner house. There was by Marble Arch, there was John's Lines, yes. We had some Florentine biscuits, ever so delicate, and we had a few of those, and I used to just go along with that. But I also went to English classes. I thought I'd have to sort of do something here. My father was keen on that. So I went to English classes, and I arranged to meet a friend one day and go to the theatre. So I had to meet at the bus stop at Whitehall, Whitehall bus stop there opposite the theatre, meet her. Well, she didn't come. I was waiting, I didn't come. There was a chap behind me, sort of, Well, you see, bus stops are the places, were the places in those days where you start checking out people. And so one of the things you can do is you can ask them for the time. Have you got the time? And then they look and see, and then you can start chatting about things because you make contact. Well, this chap, I was fascinated by that chap because he had very dark hair and so very dark eyes, and of course in Schleswig-Holstein you never see anyone with very dark hair and eyes, and he was talking to me beautiful English. He was very well mannered, well spoken and very interesting, and told me all about why I was waiting there, and after a couple of hours or so he said, well, I don't think he's going to come. And I was fascinated, and I quite struck by this, and very nice, and I thought, no, there's sort of two ways to sort of talk with one and then think about somebody else, and I thought, what do you do? So he said, well, come for a coffee down the road, come for a coffee. Well, never been invited to a coffee before, so I thought, well, what's the risk? Hop on the bus, the next bus came, and we went off. Well, once we went across Westminster Bridge, there were no street lights for a start. And I was getting a bit worried because I was getting out of my comfort zone. I was living in Dunraven Street, which is the back of Park Lane. So you've got Hyde Park Corner, not Hyde Park Corner, Marble Arch there. It's very bright lights. But the other side of Westminster Bridge, it was quite dark, and his bus went trundling on, and I was thinking, he was chatting away, and I was thinking, where is this going, this bus? When is it going to stop? And it didn't look like coffee house to me. So I was getting a bit worried. He said, hang on a minute, just here, hang on a minute, he said. He got off the bus, hang on a minute, he said, and disappeared behind a privet hedge. And then he came out again, it's all right, he said, come on in, and then before I knew it sort of, he said, I explained that he wasn't in or something. He came up quick, up the stairs, and then into his room, a little bed sitter he had, Well, the thing is, we were so taken with each other that I thought, out on my own, there was no one to say, well, you can't do this sort of thing. And what is there to lose? I think when you are that age, I was about 18 or something, that's what you do. It's quite innocent. And so, I didn't catch the last bus home, but, I made it. And then I wrote a letter. We sort of used to see each other every day. I wrote a letter home to my mother because I knew that I could only stay in England for a year as an au pair. It was work permit for a year. Wrote a letter to my mother. I said, could I please get married because I was under 21 and I was going to stay in England, and could I get married, please? Send her permission. Well, she didn't. She wrote a letter and said, come back straight away. Which you can imagine I didn't do. Within 2 or 3 months, I wrote another letter. I said, could I get married now because I was pregnant? Well, years later, my sister said, why didn't you fake this signature. I thought, I never thought about it. I could have faked it, you know. I could have just made a signature up for my mother, and that's it. You couldn't afford to go to Gretna Green, you see. So that's another thing. You could have got married in Gretna Green at 18, but couldn't. So we got married. And at that time, I was having a job in an engineering company. That's another story. But I got married in Lancashire. And had a, went back, didn't tell anyone, had a ring from Woolworths, which, to show me, because you couldn't get accommodation as a married couple without being married. There were signs everywhere, marrieds only, no children, no blacks, all this kind of thing, it's very, very strict. So we had this gold ring and we got married. The time when we met, he was supposed to be 10 years older than me. When I signed my name on the registry, he was suddenly 20 years old. But I couldn't say anything because that was it, I did think that he was 20 years old, but anyway, that's another story. But we had a baby and we got some money from India because he was from India. He was a Parsi. Parsi, very high class India, they're very much together with the Europeans. They are originally from Persia. And they felt quite superior, and they were the money people. A little bit like the Jews, had all the money in India. And we got some money because in India, you see, you have the money in the family. There's gold in the family. And if somebody wants money, then your sister would sell her share or buy her share or whatever. You get the money raised, and you've got enough money to buy a house. And that was £3,500. In London, actually in East Cheam, which is not near Richmond, 3,500. And we filled it up with students because I knew about sharing the house with people, and so did he. Filled it with students, and he did okay until I found out that he was gambling. And one day the bailiffs came to the door. By that time I had 3 children. All sons. Bailiffs came to the door and said, we're going to take the house over. Well, I didn't know what it meant, so I phoned up my mother. We had a phoned her up and I said, these bailiffs have come to the door and they want to take the house over. And she said, you've got to get divorced straight away, because that's the money part, you see. What I could have done is I could have packed my bags and sat on the council steps, council offices, and said, I need a council fund. But I thought, I have a house. I'm not going to lose it. I've got to fight for it. And that's what I did. I fought for it. Went to court and said, I'm going to. I must say that a friend of mine had advised me to go in for teacher training, because I knew the money was short. There was something wrong with the money. I couldn't understand it. We had all this rent coming in, paying the mortgage, and still there wasn't enough money. And we didn't have enough space to live in. We only lived in 2 rooms, And she said, why don't you go and train as a teacher? Because as a teacher, you can earn money and you've got time to look after the children, you've got the holidays, you've got afternoons and things. And that's what I did. And it was 1 week after I'd finished training that the bailiffs came. So I could go to court and say, I've got a job, I've got the students living with me, sharing the house, I can afford to pay the mortgage, my parents are going to pay the debt off, so I can afford to do it, keep the house, and that's how I kept it. Very fortunate. Well, about a few months afterwards, a friend of mine invited me, and after a divorce at least, invited me, and there was somebody else at the dinner, and he was a lecturer at an art school. So I thought, that's very interesting. And he had very nice shoulders. Now, I don't really ever looked at the shoulders of a man. I'm talking about, not old men, but, I thought they're really nice shoulders. It's something like I felt I would need those shoulders. And he just had a divorce, and it was just the beginning of when everyone was getting divorced. This was in the early 70s. And so he was at art school, and that really, I thought that was really inspiring for me to find something. Because at college, teachers training college, I'd done ceramics, so I got into the arts. And he was an art lecturer, so that really felt good. But not soon afterwards, in the early 80s, when we never had a cigarette, he said, well, let's move to Reigate, out of London, sell the house, move to Reigate, and do self-sufficiency. He bought a 3.5 acres there, and there was a lot of grass. And when you have a lot of grass, you need some animals, because unless you sit on the mower, which I haven't come to all that way, to sit on the mower right now, somebody said, get some geese, they eat got grass. Well, I have 2 geese, they didn't eat yours at all. Well, the farm up the road suggested he get some sheep, so he brought his sheep over, and that was okay. So I started a small herd of Shetland sheep. Shetland sheep are only about that high. Very easy to look after. When you've got sheep, you've got to do all this toe clipping, cleaning up the backside, and sharing as well. The gums, you look at the gums, and I'll take you to the, when you start breeding, we take you to the ram, because we couldn't have a ram as well, 3.5 acres. So it's a lot of work, and then the shearing. And when you do the shearing, you have to start spinning, because what can you do with all the wool? You do spinning. So I started spinning. And my partner said, David, he said, well, why don't you retire from teaching? Because my sons had all gone to college. Retire from teaching early, because it's possible, you know, somehow it's possible to retire early. And go to art college. You can go on the Arts Foundation at Reigate School of Art. And I was the first mature student. And hundreds since then have followed me. And now it's nothing but mature students. It's not just doing foundation, but also in colleges, full of mature students. So I went to do that, passed with flying colours foundation, went on to Farnham, you know, Farnham School of Art. It's very textile orientated. So they said, so Meike, you do spinning, because I was running workshops and, you know, doing really, I was known as a spinning lady. You do spinning, so you can come into textiles. So I said, yes. I never thought of textiles before. And then in textiles, there's either print or weave. So, and you want to do weave, don't you? Well, you know, I hadn't thought about it, because I was doing spinning, so, and the wool, do weave. Well, when you do weave, there's 3 Fs. Do you know the 3 Fs of weave? Mm-hmm. Well, there's floor coverings, furnishings, like curtains and things, and fashion. And fashion is 45 inches wide. It's a flat fabric, a bit like this. This is what hands open. Flat fabric. Well, I'm not into flat fabric. Well, I had to go for it because that's what they told me is what I had to do. Oh, well, you know, I couldn't argue because I didn't really know enough about it. In the first term, we had a project where you had to produce an end product. Because, you know, so end product, if you're doing floor coverings, you make a rug. If you do furnishings, you do a curtain or something. And if you do fashion, you do a piece of cloth and make a dress or something from it. Well, I thought I didn't want to do a great big flat piece of fabric. It's really boring. Although you choose the yarns and all that dyeing and all these decisions you make, I wanted to do a sort of piece of cloth which is about a foot. I thought a foot sounds nice. Foot wide and a yard long. That sounds nice, you know, foot by a yard long. And you can make something with it, like you can drape it round, you know, and sort of make a little hat with it. So I told my tutor, and she said, no, you can't do that, you have to, it's practice 45 method, big discussion, and they discovered that ribbon is woven and it can be very, very narrow and very, very wide. So I was allowed to do it, and I made my hat. I made the fabric, which is, you have to make the fabric first, but the fabric looks nothing. You know, it's just a bit of cloth. It's not 36 inches, I don't think, but it's like this. It's a double cloth. And I made it into a hat, you know. What I did, you see, it was a time of recycling. And so what I thought I'd do, I'd get this piece of fabric, and I roll up the ends, like a sort of bun, and just stitch it, so in case I don't like it, you know, stitch it together, and I make a little fold and make a little cord, and then you can wear it like this, or you can wear it like this. Both ways. And the students loved it. And of course, as soon as you get praise for something, you want to do it again. But for this exhibition then, I had to make more than one. So all the fabrics had to be done double size, one for exhibition and one for the hat. So the hats are made sort of different styles, and this one here is, it's again, it's 1 yard long, and the end is sort of made into what we call a rose, in military terms, a rose. And it's a cord round, all different colours. It's open at the top, but it doesn't matter, it's good shape. And also it's versatile, so if you want to sort of be Marlene Dietrich, you can just sort of wear it like this, it's very easy. And if you want to sort of be more severe, in another way, you wear it like this, quite friendly, a little rose at the back. And when I wore this out, I really got a shock because I thought of my mother. Not just my mother wearing hats, but also this particular style. Because we used to have wash day once a month. And wash day meant somebody came in to help early in the morning. It also meant that pea soup had to be made the day before. Pea soup, because pea soup you warm it up and have it on wash day. Because wash day, there is no time for anything. My mother was red in the face. You've got the fire going in the corner there, and the water, and sloshing about, and doing this bit, with this rubbing, and wooden tongs and things, and it was just such a, you had to keep out of the way, and she was busy, arms moving, and this scarf draped around with the sort of knot here at the back, and her hair out of the way, and this is what I thought, oh my God, my mother. It's also interesting with this first one here, that the students said, it sort of looks Scandinavian. And it's amazing how things sort of come out. There's the relationship of the shape, it's something to do with the past, which is, I believe, comes from inside, it doesn't come from outside, not from going to an exhibition and making sketches and things, and copying something like that. But just, it comes from within. So, I think, oh yes, and then, because weaving takes a long time, it takes hours and hours making a piece of fabric like that, it's double cloth as well. I then came across a felt maker. Now, you know about felt making? No. Well, you see, you can make felt from wool, and most of the felt makers use something like this. This is called roving, This is used by spinners. It is made by useful spinners to make yarn. And all the fibres, they're all aligned by a machine. They are, the wool, the sheep's wool, is sort of put into a carder, a machine carder. You've seen hand carders, haven't you? Yeah. A machine carder, it's a big wheel about sort of, that diameter. A big wheel. And the wool is just thrown on there and it's combed and combed and combed, until in the end it's spewed out. And it comes spewed out very, very thin, and it's pulled in, and then ends up like that. It's pulled into this, and given a slight twist. So this is used by spinners to make yarn. And felt makers pull it apart like this, and then make a piece of felt. You get little bits like this, and you put them next to each other, like that, on a piece of wool surface. Say if I have my surface here, on the table, put it like this, and another one like this, and then another layer on top, like roofing tiles, slightly overlapping. So this really is like putting down your wall. You know the wall, on the string, and then the weft, for the weft, you put the wool on at right angles, just like that, overlapping tiles. So you have some fibres going this way and the other that way. So it's like wool and weft. After that, when it's all lined up on the string, depending on what size you want to make, then you wet it down, you push it down, and you start adding friction. The friction is, first of all, just sort of gently done, and then afterwards you do sort of different ways of rotating your hands, or you can start rolling it up, and in the end throwing it, it's friction anywhere, and then sort of different processes. You can make this for instance here, is a very old scarf I made years and years ago. It's a black muslin, and then some wool put on top,
so it works through. There's a bit of wool here holding through the muslin. So I've discovered felt, and I made a piece of felt 36 inches by 12 inches. And I heard about the workshop in Dorking. There was a theatre designer making hats. And I phoned him up and I said, can I come? I've made a piece of felt and I want to make it. No, he said, you can't do that. Because he'd never done it before and it was, nobody did it. And you don't just make a piece of felt and then make a hat. If you want to make a hat from felt, you buy the hood. The hood comes flat and then you block it. Industrial felt, that is. But I made my piece of felt and I went along anyway. And I've got what they call a skull block, which is deep at the back and shallow in the front. And my 36 inches of felt, I draped over this shape that I made out of buckham, blocked it, and made a knot at the ends of the 36 inches, and took a little bit over what you call a rouleau in hat tones, and I called it Mercury. And I walked down the street when it was finished, because of dry felt, walked down the street, and people looked at it. And they were quite intrigued, didn't quite know what to make of it. I thought, yes, I like it. It suits me fine, it's really nice. And that's how I came to make felt hats. Now, on the last term of college at Farnham, before my degree, a lady was invited to come and interview me. This was Constance Howard. Constance Howard was on the panel of the Society of Designer Craftsmen, and she loved hats. And she was known also as a lady with green hair. Her hair was more green than this. And they made it blue. I think they didn't know her. The photographer didn't know her. The hair was green. She was the only lady with green hair. And she said, "No, show me what you've done." Very serious she was, doing the interview. And I showed her my hat that I was so pleased with. And she put it like this on her hand, and she looked at me, and she said, "But it's not really a hat, is it, Meike?" What was I supposed to say to her? I was applying to be a licentiate of the Society of Design Craftsmen, and she was sort of saying, "Well, that's not really a hat, is it?" Now, what is it if it's not a hat? She said, "Well, if you are really interested in making hats, you have to go along to London College of Fashion. It's up in London, by Oxford Circus, just over there on Dunbury side, just behind there. And they run millinery courses, and that's what I did. I was very determined. I went along, and she said, and when you've made some hats, then you can show them at the Mall Gallery. At the Mall Gallery, it's just by Buckingham Palace, and once a year, the Society of Design Craftsmen has an exhibition there, the finest artists. So I was very privileged to take part in that. And I was, because it was felt, and nobody knew about felt, I thought, I'll make something which is recognisable as a hat. It is very simple. It's my wedding series. It's flat brim with a block, crown, quite simply, and very, very light. It's got silk binding, and also it's got a rose. Now, you have to have a rose on a hat. A hat really is what Constance told me. A hat has to have three parts. It's got to have a rose, a crown and a brim. And the crown and the brim have to be in two parts for a proper milliner's hat. Now, the word milliner comes from Milan, because in Milan they had people who made wonderful straw hats. And this is about going back about 1700 something. So that's how the word milliner came about. Well, that was my wedding series. I'll show you just one of them, and then another. This I thought would be suitable for mother-in-law. Because you see, she's either not pleased, or she's mourning the loss of her son, or daughter, or whatever. I couldn't lose her daughter very easily. There's something somebody told me. I've got three sons, you see, and when she heard I've got three sons,
Oh dear, she said. And you've got 3 sons, you've got to sell all your chairs. If you've got 3 daughters, you've got to buy in as many chairs as you can. Because the daughters, you know, always go to the mother, don't they? You've got sons, that's it. They don't come back very often. Anyway, that's part of my wedding series. And then with the Mount Gallery, it's always that people sort of, the exhibition is in February, I think, January, February. And then 3 months later they write and say, would you like to submit for the next exhibition a design? And then, you know, all this business, and it just, it's so quick, you have to be quite quick. So for the next one, I thought I'd do a summer hat. Again, very safe, you know, just a very simple bow. I had some brim blocks, as they're called. Brim blocks are flat at the top, and then they just go over. So all this is a brim block, and this is a large bowler. You can also get a small bowler, but each block is a specific shape. You have very sort of tied to the shape of it. And this is a Norwegian wool with silk fibres. This is all 100% silk, which I dyed and incorporated into the felt. So that was my summer series. Again, I made 5, just like plants. You know, when you put in plants, you want to put in either 3 or really 5, not 2, not 1. You know, 5. That gives you a nice crown. And same with hats at an exhibition, because all my hats were exhibited. They all have to be sort of the same theme. You know, there's a link there, not all different, the same theme, and then 5 different impact. But you know, time flies, and the next year I produced my winter series. I'll just show you again, it's slightly different because this is a small bowler, the other one's a larger, small bowler, and I can see I got a bit tired of having the same old block. The wooden blocks, like this one here, they cost, you know, anything from £80, just a wooden block, £80 for that size, you know. This underneath is called a spinner, so when you're working on the hat, you can spin it on the hat. Do you know how to use this? You put your fabric on top, and you really need 3 hands. Because you haven't got 3 hands, you have to use your body. So if I just put the hand back to one side, I'll just give you an idea. So what you do is, if I make a block of hat, say it's a felt, and I need to get the shape, it's flat. I use flat fabric, I don't use a hooks. Flat fabric. And I wet it down a bit. And then I place the centre over here, because that's going to be the centre of the hat. And then I put it down and hold it with my body, because you know, it's going to jump off otherwise. 2 hands is not enough, and you can't, you've got to pin it on. You know, if you hold it here and pin it there, it's going to jump off, isn't it? You've got to stretch it over and go all the way around, tied up, and put it in the arbour. Arbour's the best place for this. And luckily I've got an armour, so it's very handy. So put it in there to dry, and that's just the dome block, you know. So this was what I did then, is to create this one. I just used it that way around. It was flat at the top, you see. And the fact that I didn't want to do the usual dome blocks, and I didn't have the skull block, what then happened was that the people at the college where I've been doing the foundation course, they said, we've got a gallery now, and how about you having an exhibition there? You can have a solo exhibition over our gallery. And they made sort of attachments to the wall where I could put my hats. And then I had to make hats which were not like ordinary hats, you know, had to be different. So, this one is Boy George. Boy George likes colour and easy to please hats, which are going to be worn by men as well. And this is also a flat, but it's more flexible. And also, I use a carpet roll. You know, when you buy carpets, it comes on a big cardboard roll, really tall one, and it's just right to put on your head, that size. So I blocked it on top of the roll and stitched the edge here, so to hold it in. It's on colour on both sides, and quite colourful, you know. So Okay. And the next one is not just flexible, but also you can chuck it in your, like this, put it in your bag or wherever you want to. And it's asymmetrical, and it's not, although it's got a separate brim and crown, it's all locked, it always fits. Whatever you do, it always fits. And I was commissioned for quite a few of these to be worn by men, in particular painters, because the ones, they sell their paintings along the wall by the Ritz there, by the side of the Ritz, to the left side of the Ritz, right side of the Ritz, along the wall there. They sell paintings, and if they wear a hat, it makes them look special. So I had quite a few of those. This hat I made after a visit to Nepal, because in Nepal they haven't got flat fields, they've only got hills, and they cut into the hills, they put a little shelf like this, and there's sort of water running along the side of it, that little shelf, so all along the hill, little shelves like paddy fields they call them. And also it's got three colours which in Buddhism, links to Buddhism. So that's where that comes from.